Senator Cabaldon.
Thank you, Madam President. If there's one thing that separates us from other primates, it's our ability to have a community meeting where everyone says, wait, there's a transit line on the table? We want one right here. It would be totally inequitable for the region not to build a transit stop right here in our community. And then for those same exact people at a community meeting, unlike other primates, they will say, but don't build any place for someone to live there. This is the challenge that this bill is trying to grapple with, and I think it's an incredibly important one, is that if the public is going to make investments and choose where to put our limited money in transit stops, that we need to back that up with the housing that is going to make it successful, and to marry the housing and the transit so folks that move into the housing have access to jobs and to services and to their families and to their churches. So I think that's exactly right. I came to this bill as a big skeptic, though, because I represent mainly rural and suburban and forgotten urban places in California, like many folks on this floor. And I wasn't sure that this bill, honestly, that the author would understand what I was talking about. My district is nothing like San Francisco. It's not very much like Oakland either. But I am very pleased with the way that this bill is going, not just because of the content, but because it feels to me like this, with the changes, the constant set of deep, elaborated changes that have been made to this bill, it reads like somebody who has at least visited Woodland or Davis or Stockton or Hood or other parts of California. So I was concerned that it assumed that every transit stop was the same, that the bus stop that runs every 45 minutes in Woodland would be treated just like the downtown Berkeley BART station. And that makes no sense, because you can't get anywhere else outside of Woodland with that bus stop. So that doesn't make that's no sense at all. The bill no longer does that in terms of the quarter mile or the half mile. The bill specifically focuses on those counties that have a density of high quality, high frequency transit that the vast majority of California does not yet have. And I want to highlight one of those areas, which is bus service, because Woodland has no bus rapid transit, and the bill has been amended. One of the key amendments to the bill, it's very hard to read if you're not a nerd on this stuff, but it only applies to essentially fixed lane bus routes, of which there are none in Corona. There are none in Jackson. There are none in most of our districts. No trains, no light rails, and no bus rapid transit, and therefore the vast majority of the bill doesn't apply in the same way that it did at the beginning. And so in a place like Woodland, like in many other counties, and a half mile away from a transit stop, if there was one, but remember that there isn't, but if there was, let's pick the Vallejo Ferry Terminal, a half mile from the Vallejo Terminal. Under this bill, local land use and height limits apply. Local height limits apply. You still have to get higher levels of density, but height limits are now respected. So it's one example of this tiering that is in the bill that really understands and starts to respect the very core differences between rural, suburban, and heavily urbanized places with a dense network of transit. The other issue that was important to me, at least in committee, was that we have communities that are great at this already, that know what they're doing most of the time, put the resources together, have great ideas. They know better than we do. They know better than some analysts at HCD what to do. And how do we see them? We're always obsessed with those that are failing and that are doing a bad job, but how do we see them? And so the local alternative that's in this bill, I think, is an incredibly important breakthrough. I've never seen something like this from the Senator from San Francisco before for the rest of the state, but because it allows the city to say, look, you got a better idea that will achieve the same amount of units, and it's just as economically feasible to build that, bring it on. Bring it on. Let's have the locals lead in this space. And so those are just a couple of examples, but the amended version is replete with changes that address a lot of the issues that locals raise. Oh, let me raise one other, which is that local transit agencies would run hog wild with their new land use powers. They don't have them in this bill. Right, so the bill has been limited that transit agencies only have that land use power, the development power, sorry, adjacent to the transit stops and the transit line, not in a disconnected place, not some random place in the community. And also let's remember that the Riverside Transit Authority, the Yolo bus, most transit agencies in California are actually made up of the cities and the counties. They're not rogue entities waiting to to put 20-story buildings in each other's communities. No one would ever do that. So these are not independent entities. That issue was very appropriately addressed. It was one of the top ones in the committee. So I salute the author. This, as a freshman, this was a terrific lesson in watching and being a part of a bill evolving to really address in a very deep and thoughtful and comprehensive way, address the issues that have been raised, and that really, I think, is a substantial step forward from a state policy that is run roughshod largely over local governments, especially in rural and suburban California, but now sees them in a way that will really advance our progress. Ask for an aye vote.